This is a message for the former High Court Judge of Australia, the Honourable Michael Kirby. Hello, my name is Charles Mackenzie. I'm the president of an organisation called Infected Blood Australia. We're a campaign group for victims of Australia's deadliest medical scandal, hepatitis C contaminated blood transfusions and hepatitis C contaminated blood products. There are tens of thousands of Australians who are infected with the potentially deadly hepatitis C virus as a result of blood transfusion before the 2000s. There were also an estimated 1,750 Australians with the bleeding disorder haemophilia who also acquired hepatitis C from their treatments. And in many cases, they didn't need these treatments to survive, and yet they were left with this hepatitis C virus that's given so many haemophiliacs in Australia cancer as a result, including people in our group who are dying right now, and they're going without the things that they need, okay? Things that would be available to victims of the exact same scandal. Yes, that's right. The exact same scandal occurred in Canada, Ireland, and in the UK. And in fact, in the UK right now, they're having their largest ever legal inquiry, which is called the Infected Blood Inquiry. And this is an investigation into how, tens of thousands of Britons ended up with viruses like HIV and Hep C, including, of course, the death of so many haemophiliacs. Okay, well, Justice Kirby, you have a organisation here, a medical organisation in New South Wales who are named after you. I think you're the patron, and this is the Kirby Institute. Well, the Kirby Institute are sponsored by the Australian Red Cross and CSL, and we've been trying to get to the bottom, or I have, for basically 30 years. I've been trying to get to the bottom of what has happened here with Australia's deadliest medical scandal, because on any metric, on any number, this is Australia's deadliest medical scandal, okay? With tens of thousands of people infected and tens of thousands of people affected. There's nothing else that comes close. And yet there's been no investigation of any substance. We did have a Senate committee take a look at this issue, and I forced that inquiry in 2004. And incredibly, that committee found that financial assistance, the exact same financial assistance that was made available in the UK in 2003 for their contaminated blood victims, was not needed. And so as a result, our haemophiliacs in our group, when the Senate made that decision in 2004, we had people die from my group. I actually lost friends. It was a very emotional time. We couldn't believe that they'd declined us. And then people went on to losing their homes. Now, the Kirby Institute, when we've tried to ask them questions and tried to ask for their help, because we're seeking to get our own legal investigation. I'm sure, Justice Kirby, you'd know more than anyone that something as complex as this, a Senate committee, with no disrespect to our Senate, doesn't have the powers of a legal investigation to sort of get to the bottom of things, all right? So without that legal investigation, we're reliant on organisations like this publicly funded Kirby Institute that bears your name. We wrote to Professor Law from the Kirby Institute. This is someone that the Australian government, the New South Wales government, told us was working with the Australian Red Cross on a modelling exercise to try and tell us just how many people were infected with hepatitis C from blood transfusion. And we wrote to Professor Law in 2019. I wrote to him and I said, this was a letter I wrote in 22nd of June 2019. Dear Professor Law, I think perhaps you didn't read, this is the email here, okay? I think perhaps you didn't read the email that I sent you back in March, as I've had no reply from you. Would you be able to provide a copy of the 2010 report on estimates into transfusion blood product acquired hepatitis C, okay? Now, the reason I asked that was because the New South Wales government and the Health Minister, Brad Hazzard, had told me in 2019 that it is the Kirby Institute that are responsible for that information. That's why they receive these monies from us, the Aussie taxpayer, and also from the Australian Red Cross. I then wrote to him, what interests me and other researchers overseas is that the estimates the New South Wales government are providing and saying that the Kirby Institute have come up with confused when compared with the federal government's estimates of as many as 8,000 patients are living, are still alive today, having been exposed to hepatitis C from contaminated blood before the 2000s. Okay, so there's 8,000 people out there, and many of them still haven't been traced, apparently. This virus, hepatitis C, is hundreds of times more deadly than the COVID virus. And the Kirby Institute know that. and they've used a lot of public monies to give us data about COVID. But what about blood transfused hepatitis C? How many people in Australia, Justice Kirby, were infected with hepatitis C as a result of blood transfusion? And how many people in Australia were infected with hepatitis C as a result of blood products? And what about Australia's role in our region here? Australia had this regional blood fractionator called Commonwealth Serum Laboratories. Yeah, and just recently a story came out that said that there could be as many as tens of thousands of people in our region that were infected with hepatitis C as a result of Australian-made blood products that were exported to Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, the list goes on. And there's even a chap in the United Kingdom who's a core participant in their infected blood inquiry, a guy called Di Griffiths, a very well-spoken a man from Edinburgh. And he says that he may have received contaminated blood products from Australia that led to his requiring a liver transplant. And this Di Griffiths, he has this bleeding condition, haemophilia, and that's shared by people in our group. Great men like my friend Queensland haemophiliac Greg Ball. Now, Greg and I, there's Greg there, okay? Greg went public. He's the first Australian with this bleeding disorder, haemophilia, infected with hepatitis C to really go public. And I spoke to my friend Joanne McCarthy. This is the investigative journalist that helped us put a story together in 2019. Haemophiliac brothers say it's time for a UK-style inquiry into the Australian tainted blood scandal. Okay? And Joanne McCarthy was ringing around trying to get answers as to, how many people are affected, why won't they get helped? And she spoke to a man called Stuart Loveday. Stuart Loveday was the head of a group called Hepatitis New South Wales. And he came to Australia in 1994. He'd come from the UK, and he basically set about founding Hepatitis Australia and this state chapter, Hepatitis New South Wales. So Joanne McCarthy rings him up, and Joanne McCarthy is aware that hepatitis groups around the world, government-funded hepatitis groups around the world, have called for an apology for haemophiliacs and people with bleeding disorders who are knowingly given contaminated blood products. That's right, Justice Kirby. This infected blood inquiry overseas and a Canadian Royal Commission that took place in the 1990s established that authorities knew that these blood products that were given to haemophiliacs were compromised by hepatitis. Okay, there's no argument on that now. We know that the British authorities basically downplayed and covered up the dangers or the hepatitis risks of blood products in 1974. That's already gone as evidence before this infected blood inquiry. So Joanne McCarthy, this journalist, is aware of this and does what any journalist would do. You ring up Australia's government-funded hepatitis body, hepatitis C body. And she spoke to this Stuart Loveday, and he refused to call on an apology for Australian victims. Now, this happens after a Senate committee in 2004 recommended that. That was one of the recommendations, that there be this state-delivered apology to haemophiliacs and infected blood victims. And Stuart Loveday and his government-funded hepatitis C group in 2004 welcomed the findings of the inquiry. But when Joanne McCarthy rang him in 2017, he basically, disavowed that, okay? Now, this same man is associated to the Kirby Institute. This Stuart Loveday, formerly, he's now left his role, but he was formerly of Hepatitis New South Wales. And I'm just looking at my iPad here, Justice Kirby, because I want to show you some things that worry us. Okay, so what we have here is in 2017, the Kirby Institute held a World Hepatitis Day function in 2017. There is, in the middle, there's the ABC's chief medical reporter, Sophie Scott. And on the far left is the head of Hepatitis New South Wales and the former founder of Hepatitis C Australia, Stuart Loveday, okay, who came from the UK in 1994 to set up everything Hep C in Australia, okay, and this is the guy that refused Joanne McCarthy's request that he support the Senate's recommendation in 2004 that there be a state-delivered apology, even though he totally agreed with their recommendations in 2004 when they came out. So in 2017, he changed his tune. And here they are on World Hepatitis Day. There's a chap from the Kirby Institute. There's the Chief Medical Officer of New South Wales, Kerry Chant. And this is a celebration which followed with a cocktail party attended by all of these characters to celebrate Australia's great hepatitis C success story. I think that's premature, Justice Kirby. We were asking Sophie Scott of the ABC, would she please investigate Australia's deadliest medical scandal, hepatitis C, contaminated blood transfusions and blood products. We've been writing to the ABC for decades. We've asked the Four Corners, we've asked 7:30 Report, we've asked all of them. No, they won't investigate. So, Sophie Scott was asked many times, and we've got a whole host of emails. This is one here from 2019, and there it is, again, mentioning Greg Ball. This is this Queensland haemophiliac, a mate of ours in the group, a really good friend. He has had cancer numerous times. He's the strongest man you could ever meet. His brother was also a haemophiliac. He shared these blood products that they were told there was no risk to having. They were switched from a far safer treatment in the 1980s. We now know that authorities knew that the blood product they were giving Greg would lead to him being affected. And he's had some of his medical records destroyed. Okay, just like victims did in the UK as part of this cover-up, part of this malfeasance from authorities wanting to, basically bury the evidence or whatever it is they're trying to do. So the question I have, Justice Kirby, is I don't blame Sophie Scott in a way because if she's hosting events for the Kirby Institute, right, this is her hosting a panel on World Hepatitis Day 2017, but at the same time, while promoting Australia's great success story and the great success story of the Kirby Institute, publicly funded, right? But how is it a great success story? Because, this Professor Law from your Kirby Institute, right, he won't reply to reasonable questions, okay? They receive public monies. And also, we've had victims from our group also write to the equivalent medical organisation in Victoria, the Burnett Institute. They also won't reply. They don't even reply. Why? I think we're treated as something of a taboo, us victims, right? There's nothing taboo about us. We're ordinary people. I was a kid when I was infected. I've been fighting for decades. And Justice Kirby, we need your help because how much of the Kirby's influence, their good name, has meant that Sophie Scott, what was her reason for not investigating? Here she is celebrating Australia's great success story because people like Matthew Law, Professor Law, this guy Greg Dorr, this Stuart Loveday, the Kirby Institute, Kerry Chant have all said, yay, it's a celebration. It's not a celebration for men like Greg Ball. 1,400 haemophiliacs died in Australia. It's Australia's worst treatment scandal. This same scandal, victims like Greg Ball would have been helped for years. He would have had financial assistance. His family wouldn't have lost their home if they'd been British, Canadian, Irish, the list goes on. But here in Australia, there's no help. All we get is being ignored by Matthew Law of the Kirby Institute or being ignored by Sophie Scott at the ABC, who'd rather present good luck stories about Hep C with the Kirby Institute. There's tens of thousands of people infected with this deadly virus as a result of blood transfusion. How can it be a success story? There's been legal investigations in Canada, Ireland and the UK. We weren't pioneers on blood. We took our policies and our protocols from overseas, specifically from the United Kingdom, so that when they lied about and they made mistakes about the safety of blood products, it had a knock-on effect down here. And yet the Kirby Institute, that bears your name, are running these great success stories, right? How much of that saw the ABC never investigating? We've been humiliated by this. I'm a participant, a witness in this infected blood inquiry overseas. And victims over there have been asking me, why is it? It's been on the news, it's been front page over there, it's been on the BBC, okay? But nothing here, and yet we've had proportionately just as many victims. Justice Kirby, we need your help. I urgently need your help for haemophiliacs like Greg Ball. He's dying of cancer right now. He's got liver cancer. He's had bowel cancer. He just got rid of that himself, which is another amazing story. We've got so many amazing stories of survival, but we've also got desperation for help. People will die unless we can get that help. And I myself have an advancing neurological condition. I've been fighting for 30 years to try and get justice. Please, please. And if I don't make it, please make sure it happens for Australia. Australians deserve it. Something terrible has gone on. We had an infected blood scandal too, and Australian families affected, and those people that lost children, okay, we've got them in the group. They deserve justice. We deserve answers. And haemophiliacs deserve immediate financial assistance. Please help us, Justice Kirby.